Mom, I don't get it, I said, my voice faltering as I looked around at the empty seats where my children should have been. The large dining room in my mother's house, with its sparkling chandelier and polished wooden floors, felt too big and too cold. And there I was, standing alone, as if this whole night was never meant for me. This is supposed to be a grown-up gathering, Charlotte, my mother had said earlier, her voice light, almost dismissive, but that wasn't what bothered me. It was the absence of my kids, Lily and Max, sitting at the table, laughing and playing with the others. They'd stayed home with the babysitter because, just like my mother had requested, this was a special night, a night for adults only. I felt my chest tighten, the bitter truth sinking in. And then the door opened. David, my older brother, strolled in with his wife and their 3 children, perfectly dressed in their Sunday best, carrying neatly wrapped presents. They looked like a picture out of a magazine, something you might see in a Hallmark card. My mother's face lit up the moment she saw them. She rushed over to greet them, her arms wide open, calling out to her grandchildren with that same exaggerated joy she never seemed to direct at my kids. Grammy, they squealed, their high-pitched voices filling the room. The sight of it cut through me. It was as if my children, Lily and Max, didn't even exist in her world. All because they didn't fit into the mold she expected. I stared at them, my heart sinking deeper, the weight of her favoritism sinking in. But Mom, I started, but the words didn't come. What could I say that would make her see? But then she looked over at me, noticing the quiet storm that must have been brewing in my eyes. Oh, Charlotte, she sighed, almost too casually. David's kids are different, you understand, don't you? And in that moment, my stomach twisted. Different, that word, meant to justify the sharp division between my children and her precious grandchildren, stung more than I had anticipated. I wanted to argue, to scream that my kids were just as worthy of love, of celebration, of inclusion. But instead, I simply whispered, I don't understand, not at all. I looked down at my phone, feeling the familiar buzz of text messages. But I couldn't bear to look at them. I didn't want to know what they were saying. Or worse, what they weren't saying. I couldn't be here anymore. Not when this evening, this celebration, had already made it clear where I stood in my mother's life, on the outskirts. Watching as my children were shoved aside in favor of the perfect family. I stood up from the table. The untouched appetizer, sitting there as an afterthought, seemed almost mocking now. The photos on the walls, those perfect, carefully curated family snapshots, made me feel more isolated than ever. Every frame seemed to tell a story where David's family took center stage. And my kids? They were relegated to the edges, appearing only in group shots, always on the periphery, never truly part of the picture. Where are you going? My mother asked, distracted by David's youngest showing her a drawing, already oblivious to the conversation she had just dismissed. I'm leaving, I said, my voice surprisingly steady, even though the anger and hurt were bubbling just beneath the surface. I'm going to spend the evening with my children. I didn't wait for a response. I didn't need to. As I walked out, I pulled my phone from my bag and scrolled down to a contact I hadn't reached out to in years. Antonio DeMarco. I hadn't spoken to him since high school. But he was someone I knew could change the course of this evening for my kids. And maybe, just maybe, he'd be the one to help me show them that they, too, deserved to feel special. I walked out of the house, the cold night air hitting my face like a slap. It was almost as if stepping outside of my mother's world allowed me to breathe again. I didn't know exactly where I was going. But one thing was crystal clear, I couldn't stay. Not tonight, not in a place that so easily made me question my worth and the worth of my children. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to the contact I'd been thinking about since I left. Antonio DeMarco, a name I hadn't thought about in years. We had been close in high school, 2 young dreamers, full of hope, eager to make something of ourselves. Antonio had gone on to become a celebrated chef, known throughout New Jersey for his restaurant, The Green Fork. I had always known he had something special about him, something that set him apart from the rest of us. I hesitated for a moment before pressing call. Would he even remember me? But before I could talk myself out of it, the phone rang. Twice. Then a familiar voice answered. Charlotte? Wow. It's been forever. How are you? Antonio's voice was warm, like a long-lost friend who was happy to hear from you after so many years. I'm okay, I said, though I wasn't. Listen, I've got a bit of a strange request. Are you at the restaurant tonight? He paused for a second, then said, come by, bring your kids. I'll make sure you all have a night to remember. That was it. No hesitation, no questions, just an invitation. It was exactly what I needed. And suddenly, a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying began to lift off my shoulders. I turned the car around, heading back home. The drive felt longer than it should have, but my mind was already racing with possibilities. My children, Lily and Max. They didn't deserve to feel like outsiders in their own family. They didn't deserve to be treated like they were somehow less than because they didn't fit a mold. When I pulled into the driveway, I could already hear the sound of the babysitter, Jessica, trying to keep them entertained inside. But their faces, their hopeful little faces, tugged at my heart. I could see it in their eyes. They were wondering why they hadn't been at Grammy's party. They didn't know it yet, but I had something much better in mind for them. I walked inside, greeted by their eager voices. Mom, Max called out as he jumped up from his seat, his energy instantly returning as if the disappointment from earlier had evaporated the moment he saw me. Did Grammy miss us? His voice was full of hope, his innocence breaking my heart. But I refused to let them see the sadness I felt. Instead, I grinned mischievously. How would you two like to go on an adventure? I asked. Lily looked at me with cautious curiosity. What kind of adventure? Well, I said, pulling up one of Antonio's cooking videos on my phone. How would you like to meet this chef? Their eyes widened. Really? They gasped in unison. Disbelief and excitement mixing in their voices. Really? I replied, feeling a rush of excitement that I hadn't felt in a long time. As we made our way to the Green Fork, the restaurant that had always been a staple in New Jersey's food scene, I couldn't help but smile at the thought of what was coming next. This wasn't just about food, it was about showing Lily and Max that they could make their own path, regardless of the obstacles life threw their way. And at that moment, I knew we were on the verge of creating memories that would last far longer than any family gathering could. Before I share what happened next, the moment that left an entire room of journalists in stunned silence, I want to connect with you. My amazing viewers, where are you watching from? Drop your country's flag in the comments below. And if you've ever had to fight for something you believe in, hit that like button, because this story is just getting started. As we drove through the quiet streets of New Jersey, the night air felt almost like a balm to my soul. My thoughts swirled with the mix of emotions from earlier, hurt, disappointment, but also a flicker of hope. There was something exhilarating about the idea of breaking free from the confines of my mother's expectations and creating a new path for Lily and Max. But I knew I couldn't do it alone. That's when it hit me, Antonio. I had known him long ago. Back in high school, when we were both just trying to figure out who we were and what we wanted to do. But Antonio had always had a spark about him, a creativity, a passion for life that was contagious. I remembered him talking about food the way others talked about their greatest loves. His eyes lighting up as he described ingredients, flavors, and the magic of creating something out of nothing. It was that same spark that had turned him into one of New Jersey's most sought-after chefs. I pulled into the parking lot of the Green Fork, the restaurant that had become legendary for its innovative dishes and vibrant atmosphere. As I parked, I felt a rush of gratitude. Antonio wasn't just offering us a meal, he was offering us a chance to be seen, to be celebrated for who we truly were. It was exactly what I needed for Lily and Max, something that would let them feel valued for their uniqueness, rather than pushed aside because they didn't fit into someone else's idea of what was proper. When we walked into the restaurant, the atmosphere was alive with energy, laughter, clinking glasses, the sizzle of food being prepared in the kitchen. But what struck me the most was the way Antonio greeted us. There was no hesitation, no judgment, just warmth. He flashed a huge smile when he saw us and practically ran to meet us at the door. Charlotte, Lily, Max, Antonio called, his voice booming across the room. Come on in. I'm so glad you could make it. There was something so genuine in his welcome. Something that immediately made us feel at home. I could see Lily's nervousness begin to melt away. And Max was already darting around. His curiosity piqued by the sights and smells of the kitchen. Antonio led us straight into the heart of the restaurant, the kitchen. The space was full of organized chaos, the rhythmic chop of knives, the steam rising from pots, the scent of fresh herbs and roasting garlic filling the air. It was like stepping into another world, one where everything was vibrant and full of possibility. "All right," Antonio said, his eyes twinkling as he looked at the kids. "Who's ready to cook?" Max practically jumped out of his shoes. "I am. I want to help make the food." His energy was contagious, and I could already see how much he was going to love being part of this. Antonio bent down to Max's level, a huge grin on his face. "Perfect. You're just the kind of guy the first need in my kitchen." "Lily, I hear you know your herbs?" He turned to my daughter, who had always had a knack for identifying different plants, even at a young age. Lily nodded shyly, but I could see the spark of excitement in her eyes. "Yes, I have a little herb garden at home," she said, her voice gaining confidence. Antonio looked genuinely impressed. "That's fantastic. I think you'll be a big help with the flavors tonight." As they started to get involved, I stood back for a moment, watching. There was something so incredibly powerful about the way Antonio treated them. He didn't just see two kids in the kitchen, he saw two young chefs with their own unique skills. Every moment, he encouraged them, building them up in ways I hadn't seen in a long time. It wasn't just about the food, it was about giving them a sense of worth. A sense that they belonged, right here, right now. "Come on, Charlotte," Antonio called out to me, pulling me from my thoughts. "We're going to make something truly special tonight. You've got to see this." As I walked over, my heart swelled with pride. For the first time that evening, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The kitchen wasn't just a place where food was made, it was a place where we could all thrive together. And suddenly, the hurt from earlier, the rejection, the disappointment, it didn't seem so important anymore. This was about something bigger. It was about making new memories, creating something that was truly ours. The kitchen was alive with energy as Antonio guided us through each step of preparing our dish. I watched as Max, his face lit up with excitement, dove into the herbs with a passion I hadn't seen in him before. He eagerly snipped the basil, his small hands steady, as Antonio encouraged him with every cut. "You're going to make a great chef one day," Antonio said with a wink. And Max beamed, clearly loving every second. Lily, usually reserved, was equally engrossed. She had always loved plants. And now, seeing the herbs in front of her, she came to life. Antonio turned to her, impressed by her knowledge. "Rosemary, huh? That's some serious herb wisdom." She nodded shyly, and with his guidance, she deftly chopped the rosemary. Focused and precise, it was as if the kitchen had drawn out the best in both of them, allowing them to shine in ways I had never seen before. As the ingredients came together, so did a sense of belonging. For the first time in what felt like forever, I saw my children being celebrated, not for fitting into a mold, but for being exactly who they were. Antonio didn't see them as too much or too energetic. He saw their unique talents and encouraged them with every step. The way they moved around the kitchen, working side by side, felt like something extraordinary was unfolding right before my eyes. When we finally began assembling the tiramisu, it was no longer just about food. It was about creating something together, something we could call our own. The dessert came together beautifully, layer by layer, each one infused with the joy and energy my kids brought to the table. And as we set it aside to chill, I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of gratitude. This was more than just a night out, it was a reminder of what truly mattered. Here, in this kitchen, we were valued, we were seen, and for the first time that evening, I felt a peace that had eluded me all night. The tiramisu sat in the fridge, chilling as we moved on to the next phase of our adventure. But it wasn't just the dessert that was sweet. It was the feeling that had slowly started to settle in, the feeling of being part of something that truly valued who we were. As we cleaned up the kitchen, the laughter and chatter between Lily, Max, and Antonio filled the space with warmth. It was as if this little kitchen had become our sanctuary. A place where we were allowed to just be. Antonio, ever the gracious host, moved around the kitchen with ease, making sure everything was set up for the next part of the evening. "All right, what do you think about a little treat for our hard work?" he asked, glancing over at the kids with a playful grin. Max, never one to turn down a challenge, nodded enthusiastically. "I'm ready." Lily, on the other hand, was quieter, but I could see the quiet joy in her eyes. She was no longer the shy girl sitting on the sidelines, but a chef in her own right, fully immersed in the moment. She had found a place where she wasn't just seen, but celebrated. Antonio led us to a corner of the kitchen where he had prepared a surprise. A few simple ingredients to make chocolate garnishes. It was something small, but the kids' faces lit up as they realized they were going to put their own personal touch on the dish. Max dove in first, eagerly crafting intricate chocolate curls with a concentration I hadn't seen before. Lily, following suit, worked carefully, making delicate designs that showed a level of patience I never expected from her. As I watched them, my heart swelled with pride. Here, in this space, they weren't just learning to cook, they were learning to create. To express themselves, to be proud of their talents. For the first time in a long while, I realized that this was the kind of celebration I had been searching for. Not the one that followed rigid expectations or left people feeling like they weren't enough. But a celebration that embraced individuality, creativity, and most of all, love. By the time we finished decorating the dessert and took a step back to admire our work, the kitchen had transformed. It was no longer just a room full of utensils and ingredients. It was a place where memories were made. "Looks like we have our own little tradition here," I said, more to myself than anyone else, a smile tugging at my lips. I turned to Lily and Max, watching them proudly survey their handiwork. Max, his face smudged with chocolate, looked up at me. "Can we do this every year?" he asked, his voice full of wonder. Lily, still quietly beaming, nodded in agreement. "I think this is better than any party." And as I stood there, watching my children, I couldn't help but agree. We had created our own tradition, one that was just as special as any family gathering could ever be. It wasn't about fitting in, it was about making our own path. Our own memories. This was the kind of celebration that I wanted to hold on to forever. As we packed up and got ready to leave the Green Fork, my phone buzzed with a notification. I pulled it out, only to find my social media flooded with messages, likes, and comments from friends, family, and strangers alike. I couldn't help but smile. The photos of Lily and Max, their faces bright with excitement as they worked in the kitchen, had already gone viral. I scrolled through the comments, each one a reminder of how powerful it was to simply be seen for who you truly are. "Look at them go," one person commented. "Such a great way to celebrate with your kids." Another read, "It's so refreshing to see children encouraged to be themselves in the kitchen. More of this, please." I felt a sense of validation. But it wasn't just about the praise. It was about the realization that the night had been everything we needed. More than just a meal. It had been a chance for my children to truly shine. For the first time, I saw them being valued not for conforming to someone else's expectations, but for their unique energy, creativity, and enthusiasm. The next message was from my cousin, Sophia, who had been at my mother's party. "Just saw the pictures," she wrote. "The kids look so happy. Things are pretty tense here. You definitely chose the better celebration." I felt a lump form in my throat. It wasn't that I wanted to hurt my family, it was that I had found something far more meaningful than the artificial celebrations I had once tried so hard to fit into. My children had found a place where they were appreciated for exactly who they were, not who someone thought they should be. As I read through the comments, one stood out. "This is the kind of family celebration everyone needs. A place where all are seen, heard, and valued for their unique talents. I wish more families would do this." I put my phone down and looked at Lily and Max, who were both beaming, their faces still dusted with cocoa powder from decorating the tiramisu. They hadn't just created a dessert, they had created memories, memories that I hoped would stay with them forever. In that moment, I understood something. The hurt I had carried with me from my mother's party, the feelings of being overlooked and undervalued, had melted away. This wasn't just about a night of cooking, it was about redefining what it meant to be celebrated. To belong. It was about creating our own traditions, our own joy, on our own terms. I knew we had found something much more powerful than a place at someone else's table. We had found a space where our family could truly thrive. And as I watched Lily and Max interact with Antonio, learning and laughing, I realized that this was what mattered most, the ability to create our own happiness. Our own way of being together. I smiled, knowing that this night would be the start of something bigger. The foundation of a new tradition, built on love, acceptance, and the freedom to be exactly who we were. The weeks that followed felt like a beautiful continuation of that night. A steady rhythm building in our lives. What started as a single evening of cooking in Antonio's kitchen had grown into something so much more. Every Sunday morning, Lily and Max would wake up with excitement, ready to head back to the Green Fork for another round of cooking. They were no longer just children attending a class, they were junior chefs in a kitchen that embraced their energy, their quirks, and their brilliance. Antonio's cooking program had quickly become a local sensation. The community rallied around it, parents sending their kids from all over the area to experience the joy of creating something from scratch, of being recognized for their unique abilities. It wasn't just about the food, it was about empowerment. About showing kids that they could create, they could lead, and most importantly, they could be proud of who they were, no matter what the world told them. Lily, with her knowledge of herbs and attention to detail, had started her own small herb garden at home, selling her freshly grown plants to other aspiring young chefs. Max, ever the entertainer, had found his niche in teaching the younger kids how to decorate and garnish their dishes. His boundless enthusiasm had turned into a kind of infectious energy that spread throughout the kitchen. And soon, he had a following of his own on social media, sharing his cooking tips and tricks. The best part? They were thriving. Lily was no longer the quiet girl who hid in the background, she was a confident young chef. Her natural curiosity and love for food turning into something tangible. Max, too, had transformed from a bundle of nervous energy into a young leader. Someone who could teach others and bring people together through food. They were finding their voices, their passions, and their place in the world. It was everything I had hoped for them, and so much more. And it wasn't just the kids who were changing. I found myself evolving, too. I had stepped away from the shadow of my mother's expectations, stopped measuring our worth against her idea of a perfect family. Instead, I had found a community of like-minded people who saw the value in what we were building. In the way we celebrated each other, flaws and all. One afternoon, as we sat around the kitchen table at home, the sounds of chopping and laughter filling the air, I realized something. We had created our own tradition. It wasn't bound by the expectations of others. It wasn't about impressing anyone, it was about building something true. Something that was ours. This was the family I had always wanted. Not one based on appearances or superficial gatherings, but one rooted in authenticity, creativity, and love. I think we've found something special, I said, looking at Lily and Max as they worked together to prepare a new recipe. The pride in their eyes was unmistakable. Lily paused for a moment, a thoughtful expression crossing her face. I think this is better than Grammy's parties. Max, with his usual enthusiasm, added, yeah, and we get to share it with everyone. Their words hit me in a way I hadn't expected. Here we were, creating something meaningful and beautiful, with no need for validation from anyone else. We were thriving, not because we fit into someone else's mold, but because we had created our own path. And as I watched them work, side by side, I realized that this wasn't just about cooking, it was about life. It was about embracing who we were, forging our own way, and finding joy in the simple act of being together. We had found our own tradition, and it was a tradition I knew we would carry with us forever. If you've enjoyed following our journey and want to see more of our adventures, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Join us as we continue to create memories, challenge the norm, and build our own path. Your support means the world to us. Let's keep this journey going together.